Hello everybody and welcome to this lesson from Miss Duckworth's classroom. Today we're going to be looking at how to analyse and interpret meaning, and this is lesson 2 in how to understand, analyse and interpret poems. Okay, so the skills that I'm going to cover today are going to be analysing language and word choice, analysing different devices or techniques, interpreting meaning from devices, language, techniques, and also layering our analysis by doubling up, which is a term that I'll explain a little bit later on. So just to remind you, we're going to be looking at analysis, which is literally just where you break down a poem to its most important elements, and this is where we really think about how everything in a poem works together to create meaning. So we're trying to deconstruct the different elements of a poem. So we're looking at language, we're looking at form, we're looking at structure, we're taking those bits apart, and then we're really looking at them by themselves, analysing them, trying to develop the meaning, and then figuring out how they all work together to create the overall meaning of the poem. We're also going to be looking at interpretation, which is where you explain the meaning. It's really, really important for you to try and develop your own personal interpretations that show that you have engaged with the poem. For GCSE and for IGCSE, the examiner really wants to see something that's a little bit different, that shows that you've really read the poem, understood it, and you're engaging with it on a personal level, rather than just repeating what you've maybe been told in your class. Okay, so with analysing poetry, there are various different things that we're going to be doing. As I said, it is just about pulling it apart to the various different elements and then looking at them all. What you can do is you can choose to analyse language, you can also choose to analyse techniques or devices, but whichever one you're choosing, whichever one you're doing at that particular moment, the method is always the same. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know that I like to use the what, the how, the why method quite a lot, and it's just really easy for you to remember, and it really helps you to structure your analysis and your interpretation. So you begin with, what do you notice, what do you see, what stands out, what technique is it, what kind of word is it, and then you think about why is it being used, how does it affect the meaning, how does it create meaning within that poem, how does it reinforce the message, how does it reinforce the meaning. So if you can continue to ask yourself these questions, if you can prompt yourself either when you're doing some practice or when you're in an exam style situation, this will really help you to develop your own writing skills with regards to a poem. And here are just some ideas for help in terms of how you develop your interpretation. So do try and make sure that you're using a range of different vocabulary to help you stretch your ideas and really take them further. So for the purpose of this session, I'm going to be using Carol Ann Duffy's poem, A Child's Sleep. It doesn't really matter if you're not familiar with this poem, because really what you're going to be getting from this lesson is the way in which I structure my analysis and then the way in which I develop those skills, and you can see how those skills are being utilised. That's the most important part of this lesson. So even if you're not particularly familiar with this poem, it doesn't really matter. What you should be doing at the end of this lesson is going away to a poem that you either do know or just picking a poem to practice with, and then just going through these steps yourself. For the purpose of this lesson though, you do need to have an idea of what the poem's about, because everything you say about a poem has to come back to what the poem's about, but also what the themes are, what the message is, what the meaning behind the poem is, what the feelings and emotions are. Everything has got to come back to that. So you can't analyse a quotation from a poem out of context. You have to know everything about the poem before you even begin. And if you want to know how to do that, then have a look at lesson 1, which really shows you how to read and understand a poem before you start to analyse. So it's quite a short poem, so you can pause the video now just to read through the poem, just to have an idea of what the poem's about. The poem is about a relationship that a mother has with her sleeping child. It describes the peaceful, innocent sleep of a child, but it also describes the mother's watchful presence and the way the mother feels as she is watching this. And the themes here are motherhood, parental bonds, maternal protection, childhood innocence, and love. And you will see me refer back to these in some shape or form as I start to analyse the different quotation that I've chosen for today. Okay, so let's start with just developing your analysis. So it's quite a nice place to start. It's quite an easy thing to try and begin with. So again, we have our questions. You'll notice that I've got my what and my why on the screen. So the first thing that you want to do once you've got your quotation is you want to ask yourself, what do I see in terms of techniques or devices? Now, what you would be doing in an exam situation is this quotation here. You would have chosen it because it supports a point that you are trying to make. For the purpose of this, there is no essay question. I'm just showing you how to develop your analysis. So this is the quotation that I've chosen. I stood at the edge of my child's sleep. And when I look at it, the one thing that stands out to me is the metaphor. Okay, so what I can see is a metaphor. Once I've identified that technique, then I really need to think about why. Why has it been used? Why has Duffy decided to use this particular technique at this point in the poem? What does it show me? And your why is linked to the ideas, the themes, the message, the feelings, and the emotions. Maybe not all of them at once, but you may, pick and choose elements of this that you think really help to support what you're saying. So I've decided that I think it's been used to show that the mother cannot penetrate this part of her child's life. This metaphor shows that she is on the outside. So I've broken down this quotation into the different parts. I've decided to pick out the metaphor section, and I've said I think the metaphor has been used to show the mother can't penetrate this part of a child's life. And this does link back to this idea of parental bonds, maternal protection, and motherhood. So I'm already making reference to what I know the poem is about. So this is the first stage. So now we have an analysis of a technique. So then we're going to move on to developing an alternative interpretation of the same quotation. And this is where we try and think of another way of gaining meaning from the exact same quotation. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at what else can you say? So as I look at it and I think, okay, so I've spoken about the metaphor, I've said what I think the metaphor means overall. Is there anything else I can say? Now your choice here, you can either comment on additional device, or you can then comment on language. So is there anything here that stands out to me? What word stands out? What word really gives that technique the meaning? And what really gives this metaphor meaning is this word, edge. So I want to take my interpretation further by talking about this word. So now what else can I say? Edge. Edge could also refer to the care taken by the mother not to disturb the peaceful moment. Now notice how I've used also here. It shows that I'm developing, that I'm adding something on to what I already have. She doesn't want to intrude, so instead acts as a guardian over her child's sleep so she can ensure it is protected. So look how I'm developing my interpretation. I'm guessing at what I think the meaning is, but it's a guess that is based on what I understand the poem to be. So it's not a guess that I pulled out of thin air, I'm basing it on what I understand about the poem. So it's quite an educated guess and interpretation that I'm making here. So now I've got two interpretations of the exact same line by analysing technique and then language choice. Okay, and finally, layering your analysis, and this is what I like to call doubling up. It's where you double up on something within a quotation. So I have language, I have metaphor, I'm going to double up on my technique. I'm going to add a second layer. So my first layer is here, what I've already done. Okay, so I've got my layer. Now, you could carry on with this layer and then you could move on to your next point, but if you really want to show your skills with poetry analysis, you can add another layer. And this is where you ask yourself, what else has been used? Is there something else in this quotation that has been used that also gives meaning, that also reflects the themes and the message? So I look back at it and think, right, is there anything else that I can comment on? And what I noticed is that this is actually an enjambed line. So I can talk about enjambment. Okay, there's no punctuation at the end of this line. So then I go through the same steps. So what technique? Same thing here. What technique is just an additional? Why has this been used? Why has this been used? So the enjambment has been used to show that the mother's love and protection is endless and without limit. So I have now added another layer. And have you noticed I've linked it all back to what I understand about the poem? Everything's linked back to the themes, the meaning, and the message. So we have 3 different steps there. Look how much we've managed to say about one quotation. All you then need to do is put this in an essay format, develop a paragraph, use your analytical skills, but also use your skills of writing to pull everything together. And you are showing that you can say an awful lot about quite a little. Okay, so my final tips. Always ask yourself, how does this create meaning? How does it reflect the ideas, the themes, the message, the emotions, the feelings? How do you feel as a reader? What are you supposed to understand? And then how does your evidence reinforce all of this? As I mentioned earlier, the more you can ask yourself these questions as you're going through a poem or as you're planning out a response, you will force yourself to develop. Secondly, understanding what the poem is about, what the themes are, and what the message is will definitely help you to analyse and interpret in depth. And if you haven't already had a look at lesson 1, please do so. That really helps you to go through a poem and really try and figure out what it's about and how to talk about the themes and the message. Like I said at the beginning of this lesson, everything must be linked back to that. Everything that a poet does, every choice they make in a poem is all linked back to overall what they're trying to show you, or what they want you to understand, or what idea they're trying to convey. Remember that nothing appears in isolation. How do the devices, or the words and the language work together to create meaning? And that's what we've done here with one quotation of 3 different types of analysis. And finally, when analysing, always remember the what, the how and the why. Write it down on your paper, ask yourself lots of different what, how, why questions, see how far you can develop. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really hope that it has helped you. Be a great idea for you to go away, do a bit of practice and see what you can do on your own. Goodbye.